I had been in a relationship with Ethan Clark for 3 years, but he still refused to propose to me. It wasn't that he didn't care for me, at least that's what I told myself during the endless nights of waiting, of hoping he would change his mind. But deep down, I always knew something was wrong. He loved me, yes, but not in the way I had always hoped. It was as though I was just good enough to keep around, but not good enough to marry. Then one day, everything changed. He fell in love with Sophie, my stepsister, at first sight. It wasn't the slow, gradual kind of love that you expect when two people get to know each other over time. No, this was different. It was instant, overpowering, and worst of all, completely shameless. He stopped hiding his feelings for her, and it became painfully obvious. He began pursuing Sophie openly and aggressively, as if she were the one he had always been meant to be with. The worst part was that Sophie, sweet and naive as she was, didn't even seem to care about the consequences. She just allowed him to fawn over her, while I stood by, helpless and heartbroken. The old me would have cried. I would have waited silently for him to grow tired of the new, shiny object in his life and come crawling back, but not anymore. This time I was different. This time I refused to be the one who sat idly by. I wasn't going to let him break my heart again. I couldn't. So I did what felt right. I threw away everything he had ever given me, all the gifts, all the little tokens of affection, all the promises he had whispered in my ear. Everything went into the trash. The bracelet he bought me on my birthday, the trinkets he brought back from his travels, the photo albums we had carefully curated over the years, all of it was gone. I even shredded the wedding dress I had bought months ago. I had purchased it in secret. I had imagined myself walking down the aisle to him, smiling as he waited at the end, ready to take my hand. It had been a dream, a ridiculous, childish dream that had no place in my reality anymore. So I destroyed it, cutting the fabric into shreds, as if by doing so I could sever the last remaining ties to a future I would never have. On Ethan's birthday, I packed my things and left the Clark family home for good. I didn't even look back. As I was about to board the plane, I received a message from him on WeChat. "Why aren't you here yet? Everyone's waiting for you." I couldn't help but smile faintly at the message, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I had already blocked him on every platform, cut all ties with him. I didn't want him to know that I had already moved on, that I had already accepted the proposal of Jacob Green, my college senior. It was a new chapter for me. It was a new life, and I was going to embrace it, fully and completely. The plane landed in the new city, and I felt a sense of relief wash over me. A strange peace settled in my chest. I knew that from now on, everything would be different. I would no longer be the girl who waited, the girl who cried. I was going to be someone new. I was going to live the life I deserved, a life where I was loved for who I truly was, not for who I was willing to be for someone else. I was determined that I wouldn't be the same person who let Ethan Clark break her heart again. No more waiting silently, no more sitting by the phone, hoping he'd come back to me. No, this time I was taking control. I had done the right thing by leaving, by walking away from everything that had kept me trapped. When I arrived in the new city, Jacob Green was there to greet me at the airport. He smiled at me, his familiar warmth comforting me in a way I hadn't expected. Jacob had always been the steady one, the kind of man you could rely on. He was everything Ethan wasn't. Ethan was the kind of person who would tell you everything you wanted to hear, but in the end, he always left you wondering where you stood. Jacob, on the other hand, was quiet and dependable, the kind of man you could build a life with. "Are you sure about this?" Jacob asked as we drove to my new apartment, his voice calm but tinged with concern. I smiled at him, feeling the weight of the decision I had made settle in my chest. "I'm sure. It's the right choice." Jacob didn't push me. He knew me better than anyone, and he trusted that I had made up my mind. But even so, I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He cared for me deeply, and I knew that he wanted me to be happy. And yet there was always a shadow hanging over us, this thing between us that had yet to fully blossom. I had told him I was ready to marry him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. A part of me still clung to the remnants of my past with Ethan. I didn't want to admit it, but I could still hear Ethan's voice in my head, still feel the sting of his betrayal. It was as though the scars from my time with him hadn't fully healed. As we unpacked my things in the small apartment, I couldn't help but feel like I was starting over from scratch. It was a strange feeling, knowing that I had left behind my old life, my old self. But in a way, it was liberating. I didn't have to be that girl who let people walk all over her. I didn't have to wait around for someone who didn't value me. But as the days went by, the silence from Ethan weighed heavily on me. He hadn't reached out, not even once. It was as if he had erased me from his life entirely. And yet I couldn't help but wonder if it was because he was truly over me, or if it was just his pride getting in the way. It was late one evening, about 2 weeks after I had left, when I received another message from Ethan. It was short, as usual. "Why haven't you come back? I'm still waiting for you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had promised myself I wouldn't care about him anymore, that I wouldn't let him back into my life. But reading those words, so familiar, so full of his usual arrogance, it felt like everything I had worked for, everything I had fought to let go of, was slipping through my fingers. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the reply button. But in the end, I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked him once more, just like I had done before. I didn't need him to try and pull me back in. I had already made my decision. 2 weeks had passed since I had left the Clark family home, and with each day I found myself sinking deeper into the new life I had chosen. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was mine. I was no longer tethered to the past, no longer clinging to a man who had never fully committed to me. I was free to be myself, free to embrace whatever came next. Jacob was wonderful, always there when I needed him. His calm, steady presence brought a sense of peace to my life. But despite everything he did for me, despite how much I cared for him, there was a part of me that still held back. I had promised myself that I would marry him, that I was ready to take that next step with him. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Was it that I wasn't fully ready to let go of the past? Or was it that I wasn't sure I could love him the way he deserved to be loved? Jacob had asked me many times if I was sure about our engagement. Each time I had answered with a smile and a soft reassurance. I told him I was certain, but somewhere inside, I knew I was lying. I wasn't sure. How could I be sure when a part of me was still holding on to a memory of someone else? It was during one of those quiet moments when I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection, that the decision became clear. I was finally ready to let go, not just of Ethan, but of all the ghosts of the past that had haunted me for so long. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't the life I had once envisioned, but it was my choice now. "Jacob," I said softly, my voice trembling as I stood in front of the mirror, "I've made up my mind." He had been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to come to terms with the decision. His voice, deep and steady, crackled through the phone when I heard him ask, "Susie, will you accept my proposal?" For a brief moment, I hesitated, but then I realized I had already made my choice. "Yes," I whispered, my heart swelling with an unfamiliar sense of peace. "Yes, I'll marry you." His voice softened with emotion. "You know I've been waiting for this day since college," he said. "I've always known it was you." And that was it, the moment when everything shifted. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a sense of clarity that I hadn't had in a long time. Jacob loved me, and though I wasn't sure I could ever love him as fully as he loved me, I was ready to try. As I hung up the phone, a sense of calm washed over me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't worrying about the future. I was finally stepping forward, embracing what came next without looking back. But as soon as the phone call ended, my father entered the room. He cleared his throat awkwardly, his gaze shifting nervously between me and my stepmother, Mrs. Carter, who stood behind him, looking as cold and calculating as ever. "Emily," my father said, his voice firm, "your stepsister is unwell. Her room faces the sun, and it's much too warm for her. Why don't you switch rooms with her for a few days?" I stared at him, unable to comprehend what he was asking. The audacity of it. Here I was, standing on the cusp of a new chapter in my life, and he was still making demands, treating me like I was nothing more than a servant in my own home. But I didn't argue. "Sure," I said, my voice steady. "I'll switch rooms." As the words left my mouth, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction. I was leaving soon anyway. It didn't matter what room I stayed in, but even as I spoke, I couldn't ignore the look of satisfaction on my father's face, as though he thought he had won some small victory. My stepmother smiled in approval, but it didn't reach her eyes. She was always so quick to put on that pleasant face, but I knew her well enough to see through it. Behind her smile, she was just as manipulative as ever. And behind her smile was a secret satisfaction in knowing that I would be the one to move, not her precious Sophie. Sophie, standing behind her mother, looked at me with the same false sweetness she had always worn. "Emily, don't be upset with me," she said softly, her voice laced with feigned concern. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll be fine with the switch." I could feel the tension rise in my chest, but I held it in. I was done. Done with this house, done with these people. I smiled at her, though my smile felt hollow. "It's fine, I'll switch." Later that day, after Sophie had moved into my room and my father was busy with his own affairs, I sat in the corner of the guest room trying to concentrate on packing my things. I had made the decision to leave this house forever, but the weight of it all was still difficult to bear. I had spent my entire life here, surrounded by memories of my mother and father, even though the latter had never truly been mine. Now, as I packed my suitcase, I realized how far I had drifted from the family I once knew. As I sorted through my things, I noticed something strange in the corner of the room. Sophie was standing there, quietly watching me, her expression as innocent as ever. At first, I thought she was just being polite, maybe offering to help, but there was something in her gaze that made me uneasy. She always wore that sweet, innocent look, as though she were incapable of any wrong. But I knew better than that. "Emily?" Sophie said, her voice soft and sweet, as though she were the picture of concern. "Let me help you pack. I know how difficult this must be for you." I raised an eyebrow, not sure if I should be angry or amused by her words. "Thank you, but I've got it covered." She took a step closer, her eyes scanning the room, lingering on the items I was packing. I could feel her gaze on me, sharp and calculating, but I refused to let her see that it was affecting me. I kept my expression neutral, forcing myself to ignore her. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with a kind of false sweetness. "You know, it's not too late to change your mind. We could still work things out. After all, Ethan still cares about you." Her words hit me like a slap, and for a moment I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to show any weakness. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. Not anymore. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice calm and steady, "and I've made my choice. Ethan and I are done." For a brief moment, Sophie looked at me with something akin to surprise. Then, just as quickly, she masked it with a smile. "Well, if you say so. I just wanted to help." She turned away and began scanning the room again, but I could see the gleam of satisfaction in her eyes. It wasn't hard to recognize it. Sophie had always been good at getting what she wanted, even if it meant using others to get it. I felt my anger begin to boil beneath the surface, but I didn't allow it to show. Instead, I turned my attention back to the task at hand. I needed to finish packing. I needed to leave. As I bent down to pick up another suitcase, I heard a sudden crash. It was so loud, so jarring, that I immediately looked up, my heart racing. Sophie had fallen to the floor, clutching her arm in pain, her face contorted with distress, and I could see that she was genuinely hurt. "Sophie!" I exclaimed, rushing to her side. "What happened?" I tripped," she gasped, her voice shaky. "I hit my arm on the corner of the desk." I stared at her, confused. It didn't make sense. She had been standing perfectly still just moments before, and now, suddenly, she had fallen in the most dramatic way possible. But before I could say anything, Ethan's voice cut through the air, low and commanding. "Sophie!" he shouted, rushing into the room. He knelt beside her, his face twisted in concern. "What's going on? Are you okay?" Sophie's eyes welled up with tears as she clutched her arm. "I'm fine," she whispered, trying to smile through the pain. "It's nothing. I just fell." Ethan's gaze shifted toward me, and I could see the unmistakable fury in his eyes. The same fury that always surfaced when things didn't go his way. "What did you do to her?" he demanded, his tone sharp. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I froze, stunned by his words. I hadn't done anything to her. She had tripped. She had fallen on her own. But it didn't matter. Ethan was already convinced that I was to blame. His eyes locked onto mine, his expression colder than I had ever seen it before. "Why are you always like this?" he spat. "You think you're so much better than everyone, but look at you. You can't even let Sophie have a single moment of peace without trying to tear her down." His words stung, though I would never show it. I had expected this. I had known that once Sophie was involved, he would turn on me. It wasn't the first time he had done this, and it wouldn't be the last. He'd always had a way of twisting everything to make me the villain, no matter how much I tried to protect myself. But this time, I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for his forgiveness. I wasn't going to let him turn me into the bad guy again. I stood my ground, looking him square in the eye. "Ethan," I said quietly, my voice steady, "you don't get to do this anymore. You don't get to control me. I'm done." He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without another word, he stood up, carefully helping Sophie to her feet. The two of them walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. But this time, the sting of his words didn't break me. I had made my decision. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't take it away from me. As the days went by, I tried to focus on my new life in the city. I had an apartment to settle into, a wedding to plan, and most importantly, I had to leave everything behind, especially the past. But it wasn't easy. Every time I thought I had moved on, every time I told myself I was done, a little voice inside my head would remind me of the pain. It was almost like my memories were trying to claw their way back to the surface, and no matter how hard I fought them, they kept resurfacing. The quiet moments were the hardest. When I was alone, I would catch myself thinking about Ethan, about everything we had shared, the way he had looked at me in the beginning, like I was the only person in the world that mattered. And then I would remember how quickly he had turned away from me, how easily he had replaced me with Sophie. It was like I had never meant anything to him at all. But I couldn't keep dwelling on that. I couldn't let myself fall back into the same trap of waiting for him to come around. It was over. It had to be. I was getting married to Jacob, someone who truly wanted me, someone who wasn't torn between me and someone else. And yet, as my wedding day drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The anxiety that had been quietly bubbling beneath the surface was now starting to grow louder. It wasn't that I didn't love Jacob, because I did. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was steady, kind, and dependable. But there was a part of me that still longed for something more, a connection, a spark, something that made me feel as though I were truly seen. And I couldn't ignore the fact that I had once had that with Ethan, no matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was done with him. But that wasn't the only thing that haunted me. The more I thought about my past, the more I realized that it wasn't just Ethan I needed to let go of. It was my father, too. The man who had always been a stranger to me. The one who had replaced me so easily with Sophie, his new favorite. The man who, for all his proclamations of love, had never once shown me the care I deserved. It was early in the morning when I got a message from my father. It was simple, just a few words, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. "I hope you're doing well. I miss you." I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to write back, to tell him how much I had missed him, how much I had longed for him to care about me the way he cared about Sophie. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not anymore. Instead, I deleted the message without responding. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. My father had never been the man I wanted him to be, and no matter how much I tried to make him love me, he never would. I had to let that go, just like I had to let go of Ethan. The next day, I went to the store and bought a small gift for Jacob. It wasn't much, just a simple gesture to show him how much I appreciated him and everything he had done for me. I wasn't sure if I was ready to marry him yet, but I wanted to let him know that I was trying, that I was willing to give us a chance. I had made my choice, after all, and I wasn't about to let fear stop me now. When I returned to the apartment, I found Jacob sitting on the couch, his eyes fixed on his phone. He didn't look up as I entered, but I could see the way his shoulders tensed when he noticed I was there. "Hey," I said, my voice soft. "I brought you something." Jacob looked up then, his eyes softening when he saw the small box in my hands. "You didn't have to do that," he said with a smile. "I know," I replied, walking over to him and handing him the gift. "But I wanted to." He took the box from me, his fingers brushing against mine. I felt a spark, a brief flicker of something that made my heart race. It wasn't the same as the passion I had once felt for Ethan, but it was real, and it was enough. Jacob opened the box, revealing the simple watch I had chosen for him. He smiled again, a warm, genuine smile that made my chest tighten. "Thank you, Emily. It's beautiful." I smiled back, feeling a rush of affection for him. He was everything I needed. But as he wrapped his arms around me, holding me close, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. I was trying so hard to move forward, to build a life with someone who truly cared for me. But in the back of my mind, Ethan's face lingered, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had truly moved on. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity. My mind was consumed by the countless details of the ceremony, florists, caterers, guest lists. But despite the excitement of the preparations, there was a growing unease that gnawed at me. I had been so focused on the future, on the life I was trying to build with Jacob, that I hadn't given myself time to really process everything that had happened. The past still lingered in the corners of my mind, refusing to let go. Jacob was amazing, as always. He was patient, understanding, and constantly reassured me that everything would be perfect. But I couldn't help but feel that something was missing. The excitement of planning a wedding, of getting married, should have been enough to make me feel complete. But instead, there was a nagging emptiness, a void that I couldn't fill. It wasn't Jacob's fault. He had done everything right, everything I had asked of him. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I was truly ready to make this commitment not just to him, but to the idea of a future that felt uncertain. A week before the wedding, Jacob and I met up with some of our mutual friends at a small cafe. It was supposed to be a relaxing afternoon, a chance for me to unwind, but the conversation turned to the subject of marriage, and for the first time I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "Are you excited for the wedding?" one of my friends asked, her voice bubbly with anticipation. "It's going to be so amazing. You and Jacob are perfect together." I smiled, but it felt forced. "I am excited," I said, my voice not quite matching the enthusiasm I was trying to convey. "Good," Jacob said, looking at me with a reassuring smile. "You've been working so hard on this. I want it to be everything you've dreamed of." I nodded, forcing myself to smile back. But inside, I felt like a stranger to myself. Was this really what I wanted? Was I marrying Jacob because I truly loved him, or because I was trying to escape the shadows of my past? The thought unsettled me. I had promised myself that I was done with Ethan, that I was moving forward, but no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I told myself I was ready, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if I was making a mistake. Later that night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I pulled out my phone and stared at the list of contacts. It was a silly, irrational thing to do, but I couldn't stop myself. My fingers hovered over Ethan's name. I hadn't heard from him since I left, and I had intentionally kept my distance. But the thought of him still lingered, a constant presence in my life. I didn't want to be the one to reach out to give him the satisfaction of thinking I still cared. But at the same time, the silence from him was deafening. Without thinking, I opened his contact, my thumb hovering over the call button. But just as quickly, I stopped myself. What was I doing? This wasn't the old me. This wasn't the girl who used to wait for him to come back. I had made a choice. I was going to marry Jacob. Ethan was a part of my past, a chapter I needed to close, no matter how painful it was. I put my phone down and turned my attention to the small framed photo of my mother on the nightstand. Her warm smile seemed to offer me a silent, comforting presence. She had always believed in me, always encouraged me to follow my heart, even when it led me down difficult paths. I knew she would want me to find happiness, to make decisions that were best for me, not for anyone else. And right now, that meant staying true to my commitment to Jacob. The next day, I went to see the wedding venue. I needed to see it again, to remind myself of why I had made this choice. The soft music playing in the background, the flowers arranged in delicate patterns, the glowing lights, everything about it was beautiful, peaceful. As I walked through the space, I realized that this was where I was meant to be. This was where I was going to start my new life, my future. But as I stood there, looking at the empty aisle where I would soon walk, a thought crossed my mind. What if I was making the wrong choice? What if I was marrying Jacob out of fear, out of a desire to escape the pain of my past? What if I was settling for something that wasn't truly meant to be? I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts aside. I was overthinking. This was my decision. This was my future. Jacob was the man I had chosen to spend it with, and I was going to trust that choice. When I returned to my apartment, Jacob was there waiting for me. His face lit up as soon as he saw me, and he walked over to give me a hug. "How was the venue?" he asked, his voice filled with hope. "It was perfect," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It's everything we imagined." Jacob smiled and took my hand. "I'm so glad," he said softly. "We're going to make this the best day of our lives." And for the first time in weeks, I let myself believe it. Maybe this was the right choice after all. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally ready to move on. The days leading up to the wedding seemed to stretch endlessly, each one a reminder of how much I had left behind and how much I was about to gain. I tried to focus on the details, on the decorations and the guest list. But in my quiet moments, doubt continued to creep in. It wasn't about Jacob. He was kind, loving, everything I had ever wanted in a partner. But the doubts about myself, about the choices I had made, wouldn't go away. It was the night before the wedding when I finally allowed myself a moment of clarity. I was alone in my apartment, staring at the dress that lay on the bed, its pristine white fabric reflecting the soft light. It was everything I had imagined for myself, the kind of dress that made you feel like a queen for a day. But even as I touched the lace and satin, something tugged at my chest. What was I really doing? I had always dreamed of my wedding day, of the moment when I would walk down the aisle to the man I loved, but the reality of it felt so different from the fantasy I had once held. Maybe it was the weight of my past, maybe it was the lingering presence of Ethan's memory, but I couldn't help but feel that I was walking into a future that wasn't entirely my own. Jacob had been nothing but supportive, and I loved him in my own way. But I was beginning to realize that love wasn't enough. It never had been, at least not the kind of love I had been searching for. I wanted more than just stability, more than just a companion who would stand by me. I wanted someone who made me feel alive, who made my heart race. And I had felt that with Ethan. I had felt it once, and it scared me to admit that I might never feel it again. As I sat there, thinking about the future, the door to my apartment suddenly opened. Jacob stepped in, his usual smile fading as he saw the look on my face. "Emily?" he said softly, walking toward me. "Are you okay?" I looked up at him, my heart heavy with a mixture of guilt and confusion. "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing." Jacob knelt down beside me, his expression softening with concern. "Emily, what's going on? You've been so distant lately. I thought we were on the same page." "I thought we were, too," I said, my voice trembling. "But I keep thinking about everything that's happened, about Ethan. I thought I was done with him, that I could move on. But there's this part of me that still wonders if I'm making a mistake, if this is what I really want." Jacob's face tightened, but he didn't get angry. He just looked at me, as if he was trying to understand. "Emily, I love you. I want to be with you. But if you're not ready, if you're still holding on to the past, maybe we should talk about it. I don't want you to marry me because you feel like you have to. I want you to marry me because you want to." His words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I realized just how much I had been trying to force myself into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I had been so focused on escaping the past, on moving on, that I hadn't given myself the space to truly heal. I had been trying to make myself into someone I wasn't, someone who was ready for marriage, someone who was ready to build a life with someone else. But I wasn't ready, not yet, and I wasn't sure if I ever would be. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to hurt you, Jacob. I don't want to ruin everything, but I don't know if I can be the person you want me to be." Jacob took my hand, his touch gentle, understanding. "You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Emily. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be honest with me and with yourself. If you're not ready, if you're not sure, we'll figure it out. I love you, and I want you to be happy." His words offered me a glimpse of the support I had been looking for. He wasn't pushing me. He wasn't demanding that I make a decision right then and there. He was giving me the space to figure it out, to come to terms with my own heart. "I need time," I said finally, tears streaming down my face. "I need time to figure out what I really want, what I need. I don't want to marry you out of fear, Jacob. I want to marry you because I love you, because I'm ready." Jacob nodded slowly, his eyes soft with understanding. "Take all the time you need, Emily. I'm here, whenever you're ready." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't the answer I had hoped for, but it was the right one. I wasn't ready for marriage, not yet. And maybe, just maybe, that was okay. The days after the conversation with Jacob were a whirlwind of emotions, but somehow I felt a strange sense of clarity. It was as though the weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long had finally begun to lift. I wasn't ready for the wedding. I wasn't ready for marriage, not yet, and certainly not with the cloud of my past still hanging over me. Jacob, ever patient and kind, respected my need for time. He didn't pressure me or demand answers, something I appreciated more than I could say. Still, there was an undeniable tension between us, a quiet strain that lingered in the air. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes whenever we were together. He wanted me. I could feel that, but I wasn't sure I was ready to offer him the kind of commitment he deserved. It wasn't just Jacob who I needed to sort out in my mind. There was also the matter of my father and Sophie. Ever since I had left the Clark family home, they had been silent, as if waiting for me to come back, to somehow fall back into the role I had once played. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the girl who would accept their manipulation, their half-hearted affection. I had avoided them, purposefully distancing myself, but that didn't mean I had stopped thinking about them. The day after my talk with Jacob, my father called. It was a short conversation, nothing more than a check-in, but the words still cut through me. "Emily, I've been thinking about you," my father said, his voice as cold as ever. "I know you're upset with me, but you need to understand that Sophie is your sister now. She's the one I'm focused on now, and I hope you can find it in yourself to be happy for her." Sophie. The name that seemed to hang in the air between us like a cloud of smoke. She was the one he had chosen. She was the one who had taken my place. And yet, in his eyes, it seemed as though she was everything he had ever wanted, while I was simply a memory, an inconvenience. "You're not the father I thought you were," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't be a part of that world anymore. I can't pretend like everything is okay when I know you've replaced me with her." There was a pause on the other end of the line before he finally spoke again. "You don't understand, Emily. I'm doing what's best for the family. You'll see that one day." His words, so dismissive and cold, made my heart ache, but at the same time, they gave me the closure I needed. I had spent so long trying to please him, trying to gain his approval, but it had always been a lost cause. He had never truly seen me, never understood me, and that was something I had to accept. The next day, I received another message from Ethan. It wasn't unexpected, but it hit me harder than I would have liked to admit. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, and I had convinced myself that I was finally free from his hold on me. But there it was, sitting in my inbox. "Why haven't you come back yet? I need to talk to you." For a moment, I sat there, staring at the message. The temptation to reply, to engage with him, was almost overwhelming. But I knew better now. I knew that I had already said everything I needed to say to him. I had moved on. He had moved on. This was the closure I had been waiting for, and I wasn't going to let him drag me back into the past. I deleted the message without responding, and then, as if to prove to myself that I was truly moving forward, I blocked his number. I was done. Later that day, I went for a walk through the park. The air was crisp, the sun beginning to set on the horizon, casting long shadows across the ground. As I walked, I thought about everything that had happened, about Ethan, about my father, about Sophie. But I also thought about Jacob. He had been nothing but patient, nothing but kind. He had offered me something I had never experienced. With Ethan, stability, trust, loyalty. And that, more than anything, was what I needed right now. I wasn't sure if I was ready to marry him, but I knew one thing for sure. Jacob was the kind of man I could build a future with. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The evening before the wedding arrived with an unsettling silence that filled the apartment. The excitement I had expected to feel as the day drew closer was absent. Instead, a heavy weight hung in the air, the uncertainty of my heart like a dark cloud I couldn't shake. I had spent the past few weeks wondering if I was truly ready for this, for the commitment that Jacob and I were about to make. It wasn't that I didn't love him. No, I cared for him deeply, but was that love enough? Was I marrying him because I truly wanted to spend my life with him, or because I was afraid of being alone, of not measuring up to the expectations of those around me? Jacob had tried so hard to make everything perfect. He was excited, he was optimistic, and I could see the love in his eyes whenever he looked at me. But every time I looked at him, I felt this quiet fear growing inside me. Was I doing the right thing? Was I just settling for someone who was safe, someone who wouldn't challenge me, when deep down I was still haunted by the ghost of Ethan? I had tried to block him out, to convince myself that I was moving forward, but it was impossible. The memories of Ethan were everywhere. The way he had looked at me, the way he had once promised me a future. I couldn't ignore it. And yet I knew that I couldn't go back to him. Ethan had chosen Sophie. He had made his decision, and no matter how much I longed to feel the intensity of what we once shared, I knew that relationship was dead. It wasn't even about him anymore. It was about me. It was about accepting that I was enough, even if he wasn't part of my life anymore. I stared at the reflection in the mirror, the dress that hung on the wall, the veil resting on the chair. Everything seemed so surreal. The wedding was supposed to be the culmination of all the dreams I had held onto as a little girl, but now it felt like a page being ripped from a book that no longer held my interest. Was I ready to turn this page? The sound of the door opening pulled me from my thoughts, and I turned to see Jacob standing in the doorway, his eyes soft with concern. He had come to check on me, to see if I needed anything. He was so patient, so understanding. And I hated that I was putting him through this uncertainty, this internal conflict that I couldn't seem to resolve. "You okay?" he asked gently, stepping closer. I tried to smile, but it was weak, hollow. "Yeah," I lied. "Just a little nervous, I guess." Jacob smiled, his presence calming me, but there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't fooled by my answer. He knew something was off. "You know, you don't have to go through with this if you're not ready," he said, his voice steady, without a hint of anger or frustration. "I'm not going anywhere, Emily. We can figure this out together, whatever you decide." His words hit me harder than I expected. Here was this man, offering me nothing but understanding and patience, and yet all I could give him in return was doubt. "I don't want to hurt you," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't want to ruin everything, but I don't know if I'm ready to make this commitment. I don't know if I'm doing it for the right reasons." Jacob took a step closer, taking my hand gently in his. "You don't have to know everything right now," he said softly. "We'll figure it out together. And if you need more time, I'll give you all the time you need. I just want you to be happy." The sincerity in his eyes was overwhelming. How could I not love him? How could I not want to build a future with him? And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, that my heart wasn't fully in this. Tears filled my eyes and I closed them, allowing myself to feel the weight of the moment. I needed to make a decision, a real one, not just for Jacob, but for myself. I couldn't keep running from my own heart, from my own doubts. "Jacob," I whispered, "I need more time. I'm not sure I'm ready for this. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to figure out who I am before I can promise myself to anyone, especially to you." He nodded, his grip tightening around my hand. "Take all the time you need, Emily. I love you, no matter what." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Jacob wasn't angry. He wasn't frustrated with me for not having all the answers. He just wanted me to be true to myself, and that was more than I could ever ask for. The night was quiet, and the wedding the next day seemed distant, far removed from my current reality. But for the first time, I knew that whatever I chose, whatever path I decided to walk, I was doing it for the right reasons. And with that thought, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, as if I had finally given myself permission to stop fighting, to stop worrying, and to just be. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The decision I had been avoiding, the decision that had haunted me for weeks, had finally been made. I wasn't walking down the aisle today. I wasn't getting married. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I dressed slowly, the soft rustle of fabric the only sound in the room as I slipped into a simple dress, something that didn't carry the weight of expectations. I didn't need to be the bride today. I didn't need to be anyone but myself. I could hear Jacob moving around in the other room, but for now, I just let myself exist in this quiet moment. When he came to find me, he looked at me with a mixture of concern and understanding. His face was the same, always so open, always so willing to give. But today I could see something else in his eyes: respect. He had let me make my own choice, and now, even though it wasn't the answer he had hoped for, he accepted it without question. "Emily," he said softly, his voice gentle, but there was a sadness in it that I couldn't ignore. "Are you sure about this?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'm sure. I need to be true to myself. I need to know who I am before I can promise myself to anyone." Jacob took a deep breath, his jaw tightening slightly, as if he was holding back emotions that he didn't want me to see. "I love you," he said quietly. "I always have. And if this is what you need, then I'll wait for you, whenever you're ready." And in that moment, I realized that this was the kind of love I had been searching for. Not the whirlwind passion I had once felt with Ethan, but something deeper, something more lasting. Jacob didn't need me to be perfect. He just needed me to be honest. I watched as he walked away, the door clicking softly behind him, and I knew that the future was still uncertain, still a bit blurry, but it was mine to shape. I wasn't walking away from love today. I was walking toward it, in my own time, on my own terms. The silence in the apartment felt different now. It wasn't empty. It was filled with possibility. I wasn't rushing toward anything anymore. I wasn't running away from my past. I was standing still, allowing myself to heal, allowing myself to feel what I needed to feel. I stepped out onto the balcony, the cool breeze brushing my skin as I gazed out over the city. In the distance, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over everything. The world seemed to pause for a moment, holding its breath, waiting for something, and I realized that I wasn't alone in that moment. My mother's memory, her love, her quiet strength, was still with me, guiding me forward. I could almost hear her voice in the wind, telling me that everything would be okay, that I was exactly where I needed to be. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. As the days passed, Jacob and I continued to stay in touch, to work, through the challenges of this new reality. I couldn't promise him a perfect future, but I could promise him my honesty, and that was enough for now. And as for Ethan, he remained a shadow from my past, a part of my story that I no longer needed to carry. I had let him go. I had let them all go, my father, my past, my fears, and I had stepped into a new chapter of my life. The memories of what we had shared, the pain of the betrayal, and the longing for a love that wasn't meant to be faded, little by little until they were just that, memories. And I no longer let them define me. I was finally free. Free to live, to love, to choose my own path. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough.